Welcome back everyone. Let's go ahead and talk about the iPhone 12 Pro Max and how it's been holding up the last 6 months. Now what I can tell you is that this phone obviously is still completely worth it. It's only 6 months old. There's nothing really super crazy with it or any major defects within the last couple of months, but I do want to talk about things that, have changed, any major defects, any price changes, anything that Apple's mentioned for these phones, major software updates. And starting off, the biggest thing that I think has changed is probably the amount of problems that have been happening within the last couple of months. So first off, when these phones first came out, there were a lot of issues specifically with the display. There was a lot of green line issues with the display, and a lot of people were having problems with even some touch haptics on their phones. So most, specifically with touchscreen issues and stuff, I have seen those, amount of issues really go down. Like I've seen no issues within, at least on Reddit, my comment section, probably within the first 2 months, that's when I heard the most about it. Since then, it has gone down quite a bit. So I think that's a pretty major thing in and of itself. So I think that's the major defect. There was obviously a ton of iOS issues from the first day this thing was released and onwards. My major concern with this thing was the battery life when I first bought it. But I will tell you, the battery life since then has actually gotten better. And I think that is a major, advantage with this type of phone. The battery life getting better over time, with more and more software updates is typically, not what happens. More and more software updates that come out, our phone's batteries end up getting, lower and lower. They end up getting worse and worse. That's not really the case here. This thing had a fairly large 3687 mAh battery, which sadly was smaller than the predecessor. The 11 Pro Max had a bigger size battery, but I don't think it was a crazy big deal. I thought at that time I was just more so sad that it did have a smaller battery, but they couldn't make it bigger or whatever. But I will tell you, it's not that bad. It's still about the same as the 11 Pro Max, but I still think the 11 Pro Max's battery on iOS 13 is better than what the 12 Pro Max had even now on like iOS 14.5. So keep that in mind, but I will say the 12 Pro Max battery is still very, very good for sure. And I think it's one of the biggest advantages for picking up a phone like the 12 Pro Max. Now, the price tag is another one of those things that has fluctuated a little bit, but it's been pretty stagnant recently. This phone, was obviously a $1,099 phone, so almost $1,100 phone. Massive price for a phone to pay for nowadays, but it has gone down a little bit. I've seen them for around $950 to $900. I still have yet to see many for like under $900. They're still hovering around that price tag, but if you want one in really bad condition, I'm sure you can pick one up for that price. But I don't think that's that big of a deal. I think this phone's, price tag is still very good. There was no like sharp decrease in the price, like we see on Samsung's or LG's or OnePlus's. OnePlus isn't even that bad, but this phone's price tag has been a steady decrease, which like I said before, is a really good thing to keep in mind. You don't want to buy a phone and have it, half the price like a year later. This phone is going to be, based on what the numbers are looking like right now, it's probably going to end off around $800 to $850 come around, the next, September event or whenever the iPhone 13 event is. And then there is probably going to be around $700 to pick up probably a year from now. And I think that's a really good steady decrease. You're going to get a very solid phone for that. So those are the major differences that I can think of that are beyond things that are always going to be stagnant, like the display and like the feeling in the hand and like all this other stuff. This phone is still a very good phone when it comes down to those things. Now, I will tell you, the body still feels extremely premium. We've got the next offerings from Samsung with the Galaxy S21s and the S21 Ultras, the OnePlus 9 and 9 Pros within this phone's first release. And I still say this phone is the best feeling phone out of all of those. I think the S21 Ultra is a very close second, but this one is just the best premium feeling phone probably right now. The flat sides, the frosted glass back, and just the solid feeling in the phone. This thing feels extremely good. Unfortunately, I'm not a huge fan of how big that camera sensor and how, heavy it is. This phone is very top heavy, very similar to the S21 Ultra, and it still hasn't grown on me. I'm not a huge fan of it, but there are cases to kind of level it out, especially with like the MagSafe charger on the bottom. It can kind of level it out a little bit, but it's still a very heavy phone for the top heaviness for sure. The display not having 120 Hz isn't really that big of a deal to me. The smoothness factor that this phone still has is very good. It's a very smooth feeling and just running phone in general. So I think that is another pretty big asset for a phone like this. You're going to be getting a very solid performing phone. You're going to be getting a very solid display on this phone as well. So I think that's another pretty big advantage of it. And on top of that, I have to tell you, the cameras are still extremely good. Nothing has super changed with these cameras. We haven't really gotten many iOS 14 updates that were situated for the camera. I look at One UI, and One UI 2.5 was a pretty major update for the camera itself, and we got a lot of new features. Unfortunately, with Apple, we pretty much had the same type of camera UI and the same type of camera features for a couple of years now, and nothing really has changed. I think portrait mode was like the last major thing that changed. Maybe 4K 60 on the front, but none of those things have came with this phone or with a certain software version anytime soon. So hopefully we can kind of get some changes here, probably with the 13, but at least it hasn't gotten bad, at least it hasn't gotten worse. So I think that may be another advantage for this phone, that it hasn't gotten worse over time. It's actually gotten better since its release. So I think that's kind of a major thing to keep in mind. And I guess I have to end off with the performance, but you guys already know how it is. A14 chip inside of it, 6 gigs of RAM, the first iPhone to bring 6 gigs of RAM, this in the 12 Pro. And as I mentioned, this is one of the best performing phones still. It's not a bad performing phone. I've, since then compared this phone to the S21 Ultras, the OnePlus 9 Pros, and a ton of other phones since then. And this phone still takes the cake. It's still one of the best performing phones. I don't think it's the best performing phone. I think there may be some other issues here and there that are kind of hindering it of being number one, but take it as you will. But I think this is a solid phone for just the case of the performance. You can buy this phone today and still have a great performing phone even 2 years from now. Look at a phone like an iPhone 10, that's a beautiful phone that's still, it came out in 2017, almost 4 years ago, and that phone is still a very decent performing phone. And anytime I make a comparison with it from even the newer phones to this one, a lot of people are still interested in, a lot of people still own this phone. So I think the iPhone 10 is a very good phone when it comes down to that. The 12 Pro Max is a very solid phone. It's almost the same thing. This is a future-proof phone. Yes, there were some issues when it first came out, and yeah, it's pretty expensive, but it's not a bad phone. This is one of the top phones you can still buy. It feels really good in the hand. It has a lot of asset when it comes down to the performance chipset, and I think that's a humongous advantage for sure. So to kind of sum up this video, should you still buy a 12 Pro Max? Obviously yes, but how has it held up the last couple of months since it's been out, 6 months to be in fact? I think, this phone is still very much worth it. It's a solid phone for sure. The only issues I really do have with it is, first of all, we're getting kind of close to the iPhone 13 release, so it might be worth it just to wait it out, a couple of months to get the iPhone 13s. But I do think on top of that, this device isn't really a big upgrade from the 11 Pro Max. Now, it's almost a perfect phone. It's a great phone. But you look at the 11 Pro Max, the 11 Pro Max is almost the same thing as the 12 Pro Max, and it's much cheaper. So if you're just looking at this phone in and of itself, it's it's like the best phone you can buy, one of the top phones you can buy. But when you step back and you look at last year's phones, the 2019 phones, dude, the 11 Pro Max is the same thing as the 12 Pro Max. And that was one of my biggest frustrations with this device. And it's still apparent more now than ever. I feel my 11 Pro Max, I play with it, I use it in some of my videos, and it's such a solid phone. It has so much going for it. And then I pick up my 12 Pro Max and I'm like, yeah, it's a great phone, but I don't know, it just feels like there's not that much, going on here. And in some ways, with the battery size, it was a downgrade, and that really threw me off. But with all those things thrown away and just looking at this phone in and of itself, I still think it's completely worth it, and I think it's a very solid phone when it comes down to it for sure. So if you want to pick it up, like I mentioned, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. If you guys have any other questions or anything, let me know in the comment section as well. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count. So it means so much if you guys can hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.